I'm in the car, or else I would share my video, but it tends to make everybody nauseous.
Hey, as long as you're here, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
That's all I care about. All right, so I have another call at 9, and I get long-winded, so I'm going to get started. So we're recording. All right, so thank you everyone for joining me in the first discussion. This is going to be, we're going to have weekly discussions. I'm Justin Golston. I'm going to be your mentor for this class. I say I'm not a teacher, I'm a mentor, right? I train people on how to be successful leaders, how to be servant leaders within your organization. In my experience, I was a management consultant for a number of years, primarily working with manufacturers and distributors around the world. From there, I got into higher education because I had a number of mentors in the industry as well as within higher education. So, I'm here to share my experiences with you all. I think that I found myself to be a little different from other instructors, where I talk about practice. I don't talk about the theory. I talk a lot about my experiences as it pertains to the course content. And there's a lot of things going on with the pandemic, and there's a lot of positive outcomes that's going to come out of this thing. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk a lot about the current developments in terms of supply chain management and operations management. If you reflect back to March, April timeframe, you couldn't turn on the television without hearing the word supply chain. So I've always been biased to say that supply chain runs everything. I used to tell people, before it became a house, a common term in the news, where I say, just look around your room right now. Look at the laptop you're on. It got there. You're able to view me because of supply chain management. So it's a very important practice, regardless of what industry you're in. I teach at another institution where I have a lot of nurses within the MBA program, and they say, "Oh, this is all Greek to me." I say, just look at the daily activities that you do. Look as a nursing manager, look at how you schedule. How you schedule your nurses. That's capacity planning, and you're looking at the number of occupied beds. That's your demand. And you're using the concepts in which we're going to talk about in this class in your day-to-day activities. Okay, so if we look at the syllabus, so we have a number of quizzes. Pretty much we have a quiz each week that we're going to go through. Thank you all for those who have started to go into the discussion boards. I'm going to start getting into there once I get caught up. This week is a crazy week for me, especially with everything. Cause I live close to the DC area, so there's a lot of nonsense going on right now. So within the class itself, we're going to talk about the different business functions. We're going to talk about how we need to, you probably heard of the term breakdown silos and things like that, where different departments have tunnel vision within an organization. And the key to supply chain management is visibility, collaboration, and communication. And we've seen that a lot within the last year, where organizations had to collaborate with their business partners to survive, right? They had to communicate with their business partners to survive. So, and that's one thing that we've been discussing a lot over the last 20 years within the supply chain practice. But it has been accelerated within the last few months alone, as well as technology. You'll hear me talk a lot about technology. I did a number of TED Talks on blockchain. So if you go to TED.com, type in my name, you'll see a number of talks that I did on blockchain. I just got off the phone with someone. We're talking about doing a startup. A blockchain startup, another blockchain startup, I would say, in the area of tracking and tracing ownership shoes, and tracking ownership of couture fashion. So couture fashion is, essentially where these people in New York will buy they'll pay $10,000 for a one of a kind dress. Right. So we're going to put that on a blockchain where you're tracking and tracing that, and it'll have an identifier attached to it. So that's just one use case. And one thing I talk about is that blockchain is very important in the supply chain industry, in that we have a lot of issues with tracking and tracing of raw materials, and child labor and modern slavery and things like that. And you'll also hear me talk a lot about sustainability, and all of that falls under that sustainability umbrella. So we're also going to talk about a number of different things like forecasting. We're going to talk about sales and operations planning. We're going to talk about Lean Six Sigma, one of my favorite topics. We're going to talk about enterprise resource planning systems. I wrote a book on ERP applications. So a lot of these things that we talk about, I've lived it within the industry. It's not just theory. I'm going to talk about my experiences within the industry. So we're going to talk about the components of supply chain and operations management. We're going to talk about how the components of supply chain, if you look at your smartphone, if you look at your Samsung phone, if you look at your Apple phone, everything starts with your supplier. Your supplier of the cameras, the supplier of the motherboard with the CPU within your iPhone. So whenever Apple brings out the Apple 50, right, and they say, I'm going to put 50 cameras on the back of this phone, Apple has to source or understand where they're going to purchase those cameras from, who they're going to purchase those cameras from, right? So they have to source those cameras. So once they decide who to get those cameras from, then they have to purchase those cameras. So, and not only do they need to purchase, all of the cameras that they're forecasting that has to be made for the U.S., they have to say, okay, how many iPhone 50s do I need for the world? Okay. So once they determine that, and there's a way in which they determine that, looking from previous iPhone releases and the demand from previous iPhone releases, then they cut that purchase order for the 5 million cameras they need for this new iPhone. So now, once they purchase that, they say, how in the heck do we get all of these cameras to our manufacturing facilities in China? Because they manufacture. Apple does not manufacture anything. They subcontract everything to a contract manufacturer. So if you look up Foxconn, Foxxconn, that was one of the manufacturers that Apple got in hot water with, because Foxconn had some unethical practices where they had their employees sign suicide pledges, because they had a high number of suicides within their facilities because of their environments. Tom, you heard about that? You're sitting there shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I work with a lot of contract manufacturers, and that's like a hot topic is Foxconn.
Yeah. So I actually spoke with somebody who worked for Apple. He was like, "Oh, we got rid of that. We got rid of that." I was like, "Okay, well, you know what? That's all business schools talk about, So, and that's another thing in terms of sustainability. Once that happens, it's always there. People don't forget. It doesn't matter how much you dump into PR. People don't forget stuff like that. And given that this program is grounded on sustainability and sustainable practices, that's one thing that's very important. And that's the thing that I'm very frustrated about, is that it takes organizations getting caught before they want to talk about sustainability. Nike's the same exact way. Child labor. Now Nike's saying, oh, we have 40% of our products made from sustainable materials. Yeah, but you had child labor 10 years ago. Damage is done, right? So, and and you can say that IKEA is one of the most people say IKEA is one of the most sustainable organizations in the world. Now, this next example is I truly believe that it was out of their control, where IKEA got caught for having formaldehyde in their raw materials. So it was because of their suppliers, where they had to pay fees on their end. So that's another thing where, it's very important to have that communication and visibility and transparency throughout your entire supply chains, because something that your tier 3 supplier is engaged in could negatively impact you, right? You're in the limelight, right? But you might have a manufacturer in Bangladesh that's 3 suppliers removed from your raw material supplier that has child labor. And because everything gets tied back to you, now you're the employer of child labor, right? So it's great. So another thing is, type, if you write down, and this is for everybody that's listening to this recording, if you type in slavery, I think slaveryfootprint.org. Let me look it up real quick. You see how I ramble? I can't get past the first line. Slavery footprint. I don't know if it's .com or .org. Give me a second. Slaveryfootprint.org. This is an excellent exercise. So as soon as you go on that website, it says how many slaves work for you. And you say, oh, I know slaves work. I got 69. 69. So just go through that exercise and you'll be blown away, right? It'll bring things to light, because you go through, how many articles of clothing you have in your house, how large your house is, how many cars you own, how many, electronics you own, because everything gets tied back to those tier 3 suppliers, right? So that's one thing that's very important. And with the Fox, we're moving on to the Foxconn. Once Apple sends all of those raw materials to the contract manufacturers makes these millions of iPhones, and now they have millions of iPhones sitting in this manufacturing facility and say, where the heck do we put all this stuff at? So now they have distribution centers, storage facilities, pretty much Amazons sitting in China to store all these goods. And based on your model, you could say, okay, once I produce 10,000 iPhones, hypothetically, I can send 10,000 to Australia, 10,000 to India, 10,000 to Mexico, 10,000 to the US, or you can stock all these things up and then blow them out to the world, right? Depending on what your supply chain model is, what your supply chain network model looks like. So once you have all of these iPhones sitting in distribution centers around the world, then Tim Cook goes on the stage and says, "Oh, we have an iPhone 50 with 50 cameras on it." Now that builds up the hype to us as consumers, and then the retailers, the T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts, the Verizons, receive all of these iPhones from the distribution centers, and then you go in, wait in line, and then you get your iPhone. So that is a perfect scenario of a supply chain. And given this, we have disruptions. We have had the largest disruption in supply chain history over the last year. But I always say that supply chains are cyclical, in that you have earthquakes, you have worker strikes, you have hurricanes, and you have things that arise where you have to pivot, you have to adjust, you have to be agile, you have to be innovative in getting those products, those end products to your consumers, right? If you don't get them to your consumers, your competitors will, and that's one thing to think about when it comes to supply chain management. And we've seen that, pretty much Amazon saved the world in March and April last year, right? Because everybody was shut down except for Amazon. But I also say that Amazon used to sell books, and they've become one of the largest organizations in the world through supply chain management. Alibaba is the top three company in the world. They became a top 3 company in the world through supply chain management and e-commerce technology. The topic you're talking about this week. So these tools, these practices, make companies the largest companies and most successful companies in the world. So moving on from the supply chain components of supply chain, I should say, we're going to talk about, process mapping and layout planning. So process mapping is where you will lay out the processes for each work stream, as I say. So we don't do a process map for an entire organization in one map. You're going to say, what are the steps it takes from the time the customer places the order to the time that that order gets shipped out? Okay. Step one, order comes in. Step two, customer service rep reviews that order, confirms the price and confirms the quantity. Step three, that pick list gets sent out to the distribution center. Next step, the picker picks that product. Next step, that product gets packed. Next step, the product gets shipped. And in some distribution centers, once it gets shipped, then that customer gets invoiced. So that's that order to cash. That's that order to cash cycle. Then you'll have a procure to pay cycle. Then you'll have a engineer to order cycle. So those work streams is essentially that process map. And then you also have layout planning where we're going to do facility layouts. So if you look at a grocery store, you'll see that cereals are lower on the shelf so your kids can pull it. You see that if you look at the Amazon distribution center right now, I guarantee you they have hand sanitizer at the end caps or hand sanitizer at the end close to the shipping dock, because they know a large percentage of orders they're going to have hand sanitizer on them. So once they've gone down the aisles and picked all the other products, they just walk by, just pluck off the hand sanitizer, throw it in a buggy, and then go pack it. It increases efficiencies. So that's what we talk about when we talk about layout planning, demand planning, and qualitative and quantitative methods. That's where we're going to talk about forecasting and things like that. There's an approach that we have recently seen introduced within the industry called demand sensing. So demand sensing is what we refer to as near real-time forecasting, where it's going to pull data from social media. It's going to pull data from IG. It's going to pull data from Facebook. It's going to pull data from Twitter to see what consumers are talking about when we're referring to products. Okay, so unfortunately, because people are talking about a civil war, because people are talking about a World War III, I tell it like it is. There's probably a hit for gun accessories. It's probably a hit for bullets and things like that for some of those people in that type of industry. But just because they're pulling this stuff and they're using artificial intelligence to kind of link those words with products, and it's saying, okay, we're going to see an increase in demand in gun holsters. We're going to see an increased demand in locks for houses. We're going to see an increased demand in whatever that video conference Ring. We're going to see an increase in terms of protective type products. You're going to see an increase in it just because of yesterday, right? So that's where demand sensing comes in, where with a traditional forecasting system, we're not going to see that until March, right? Because you're going to see a big jump. You're going to see a big jump in those products now. On January 6th, there's a big jump in those products. But with demand sensing, they see it now. Okay, so again, that's probably a bad example, but that's the reality of the world, right? That's the reality of the country. That's how organizations think, right? So we're also going to talk about project management. So that's one of the most important pieces to supply chain management. You'll have different disciplines. You'll have all disciplines, like I said, require project management. Every single discipline has a project, and those projects needs to be managed, things like that. Those projects need to be monitored. Okay, so that we're going to talk about that with project management. We're going to talk about the tools for purchasing and procurement, going back to that Apple example of, okay, I need to source, the supplier that's going to give me my 50 cameras on the back of my phone. Once I find that supplier, now I need to negotiate, purchasing agreements for those suppliers. Next, we're going to talk about, key relationships for suppliers. With that long-term relationship with that camera supplier, there's different types of relationships we have with suppliers. We have We have relationships with suppliers that provide me with my screws, right? I don't really need a long-term, I don't really need a close relationship with that guy. I just say, send me 10 pallets of screws, and that's all I care about. And when I need it, that's all I care about. I'm happy. You're happy, you get paid. But then you have some industries where, you know, I'm pretty sure that Apple works with their manufacturers on research and development to say, okay, we're gonna put 50 cameras on this iPhone. Mr. Supplier, how feasible is that? How much is that going to cost me to make? Right. So that's where those relationships come in. We're also going to talk about inventory management, different types of inventory. We're going to talk about lean and within that area. We're also going to talk about ERP, my most important, my most favorite topic. Like I said, I wrote a book on it. I have sent out people who have, you know, requested books. I can get them for cheap. Just give me your work address, give me your home address. I'll send you a book for free. I'll drop ship it because Amazon prints them for me. And then also tools for material requirements planning. So material requirements planning is essentially that tool where when Apple places those orders, it runs material requirements planning, and that contract manufacturer says, okay, how many parts do I need? What parts do I currently have in inventory that I could use from the previous iPhone, release, like the screws, for example, you know, and then it says, okay, of these parts I need, where do I get them from, and when can I get them? You know, that's the material requirements planning tool. Material requirements planning is a module within the ERP application. And then we're going to talk about quality management and the importance of quality management. So any questions on that? Okay. So also, you're going to have a number of MyLab assignments. So for some people said that they had issues with MyLab. Hopefully that got resolved. I received a message that said that MyLab issue was resolved. So if you're still having issues with that, please let me know, and I can get that resolved. There's going to be a number of different discussions that we're going to have. This discussion this week is a great discussion. We talk about robotic process automation, business process automation, blockchain, things like that. And I would say that that's the future. I'm not going to get on that because it will be 9:15 before I finish talking about technology. We have a number of quizzes, the spreadsheet assignments. So with the spreadsheet assignments and the simulations, we will go through those within those given weeks. For those spreadsheet assignments, the one thing I explain is to understand the numbers. I know a lot of people have concerns about quantitative reasoning and things like that. But my thing is, because ERP applications perform the calculations for you, it's my goal for you to just understand, you know, where the numbers come from, understand the numbers, understand the quantitative methods and things like that. You know, if there's a few errors here and there, you're going to get full credit. Like I said, the ERP systems do it for you. Okay, so don't get too hung up, don't get too bogged down on those spreadsheet calculations, but you do have to be somewhat accurate. But like I said, the ERP applications do it for you. Also, what else do I want to talk about? Oh yeah, so for submission guidelines, yes, we have the submission guidelines for certain days, which are outlined within the class itself. But given the current situation, if you think that you're going to be a couple days late because of family issues, because of work commitments and things like that, just reach out to me. Just let me know. You know, just say, I need 2 more days. No problem. You won't hear anything out of me. The only thing you have to do is communicate. That's all I ask. All right. I'm very easy to get along with if you communicate. Okay. So as it pertains to the syllabus, are there any questions on that?
I have a question on the Harvard course pack activation. So
Yes.
I registered for it. I have the account, and then instruction says your instructor will assign you a scenario, but you'll get a link to activate the course pack. or it should be there after signing in or registering?
So
I,
yeah, so once we get to that week on the course pack, yeah, just hang tight because I mean, I would say every time I've taught this class, I've had problems with the course pack, and I've had to get Susan involved every single time.
okay,
So once we get to that week, we're all going to work. We're all going to work through it. I'll probably set aside a good 15 minutes to make sure that everybody on that session. I'm not a fan of the course pack just because the configuration is clunky. But once we get into it, it's phenomenal, right? It's just setting up that course pack that's an absolute pain. But yeah, once we get into that week, we're going to walk through it on during the scheduled discussion, and we'll make sure everyone's available, able to get it. Okay.
okay, thank you. It
Yeah.
was just, it's not a graded assignment. It says due this Sunday, you need to activate it. So
Yeah.
I registered for the account, but I don't see anything under course pack when I log in.
Okay.
So
Send me a
that's why I was
screenshot.
curious. Okay,
Yeah. Send me
yeah,
a
I was
screenshot.
curious. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we went through a number of these discussions. Yeah, the course pack, I got moved up. So yeah, so go through all these modules, and please introduce yourself. I know a number of you have already done that. Thank you for that. So please introduce yourself because I'll review those. Although I don't respond to everyone. I do review those because that's important for me to know what industry you all work in, what part of the world you are in, because I tie that into the course content itself, right? So for example, I had 3 students that work for Tesla, like earlier last year. So a good number of those discussions were related to Tesla, not only because those students work for it, but because everyone can relate to it. Everyone knows who Tesla is, right? So and then, for example, like Tom is in Tom's case, he does a lot with contract manufacturers. I'm gonna bring up a lot of contract manufacturing right now, right? And as we go through the class, so that's just one example. So again, if you're in healthcare, I'll talk a lot about healthcare. So again, please respond to that introduction. Let me know what industry you work in, and also, if you haven't done so, let me know what your goals are, in this program, because I know a lot of people in a lot of industries. Perfect example. I had because I do a lot of talks on blockchain, and I do a lot of conferences on blockchain, and a lot of those conferences get posted on YouTube. I had a blockchain startup outside of LA reach out to me to work with them and advise and serve on their advisory board. And I did a podcast with the CEO, and we were talking for like an hour and a half even after the podcast was over. And I said, Christopher, what are you doing in like 2 minutes? He's like, nothing. I said, you want to guest lecture? This was at Penn State. He's like, what? I said, do you want to guest? He said, what are you talking about? I said, you're a VC. You have a portfolio. This is a project portfolio management class. You can talk about something. He was like, yeah. So I had a CFO just pop up in my class, and the funny thing was that I had the students explain a project they did 2 weeks prior, and they mentioned one company, Terminal 49, and Christopher said, let me stop you there. He said, I know the CEO of Terminal 49. These students researched the company, and Christopher knows the CEO of that company. So after that class, Christopher reached out to me and said, you want me to reach out to Akshay to see if he wants to come speak and guest lecture. So the week after that, I had another CEO come in and talk to the class. So for Christopher's company, I had one of those students get a job because he was interested in blockchain, and he had ERP experience, and he demonstrated his knowledge and passion to me. I got him a job 2 days later, right? I'll make that point to say, let me know what your goals are out of this class. Let me know what your goals are once you complete this program. So because I have a lot of connections within the industry. So again, introduction to supply chain management. That's where we talk about the different methods of supply chain management, where we talk about suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, things like that. Again, we're going to go to product and service design, where we're going to talk about the process mapping and things like that. We also talk about demand forecasting. I think I've already uploaded a forecasting, an hour-long forecasting presentation. If not, no, I haven't uploaded it yet, because I'm going to go through it during that weekly discussion. Then week 3, we're going to talk about project management. I teach supply chain and project management at Penn State University. I'm the coordinator at Penn State University. So I do a lot of discussions on project management within the industry, as well as within higher education. We're going to talk about, the agile and waterfall approaches, because they're 2 different things, and you're seeing an emergence of the agile methodology within the industry. And that's one thing that's not really taught a lot within higher education, which I have a problem with. So I talk a lot about agile. Sales and operations planning, and sales and resource planning we're going to talk about. So sales and operations planning is one thing a lot of organizations talk about, but really don't implement it effectively. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is one thing that's been highly discussed with the pandemic, where once the pandemic in March came out, then all of these analysts, all of these researchers who didn't know what they're talking about said, "Oh, our supply chain's too lean," right? So one of them interviewed me for an article, and there is no possible way that organizations can have. So we have safety stock, where we have, where we can buffer against uncertainty. But there's no possible way organizations can have a pandemic stock. Even if you got a pandemic stock, you're still going to get wiped out. If you have a pandemic stock of PPE and you're the only company in the world that has a pandemic stock, you're getting wiped out, right? So there's no way for an organization to have a pandemic inventory. And then I also had a student who worked in the healthcare industry to come back and say, well, the government should have had a pandemic stock, right? Well, you know what? We were sending PPE over to China, so we were tapping into our reserves before the virus hit the U.S. So there's a lot of consideration. There's a lot of things that have to be considered whenever we're talking about, Lean, Six Sigma, inventory control, logistics, and things like that. Okay. So that's the topic of discussion right now. I got through that pretty quick. So we're just gonna I don't like hear myself talk for the entire time. So we're just gonna go around. I know, Adriana, you're driving, so you don't have to if you don't want to. But so Tom, talk about your industry a little bit. What's your goals in the class? What's your goals in the program? Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
All right. Yeah. So I work in the tobacco industry. I work for Juul Labs.
Okay.
So we make consumer electronic products.
Yeah.
I've been with Juul for over 2 years. I started out as an engineering program manager. I started out working in the new product introduction team, so ramping new automation, bringing them to new countries, new facilities in the U.S. as well. And then I moved over to sustaining, where I kind of led more complex sustaining lean initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, I guess within the last 4 months, I moved over to the CapEx GSM side. Currently, I manage 2 OEM suppliers, one in Singapore, one in Wisconsin, and then I manage the relationship from a CapEx perspective on the commercial side on the GSM side, from a commercial perspective for Philips Medisize in China and in the US. So my goals for the class, I'm really just looking to sharpen my skills and hopefully bring more to the table within a more leadership role within my company.
Excellent. Yeah, now I'm big on leadership as well. I actually had so I had one podcast where I talked about diversity and inclusion. Then I had another presentation. I actually did it in Singapore, entitled "The Changing Face of Leadership." It was a keynote at a conference in Singapore, and with me doing a keynote and talking about diversity and inclusion, what do you think everyone did? What do you think they thought I was going to talk about? I didn't talk about that, right? I talked about the changing face of leadership is more of shared leadership. It's more of getting those young people to the table. It's more of getting those young people a seat at the table, because that's where the innovation is going to come in, right? You're young, right? So it's like you need to demonstrate your value, right? And that, I think, if that's the key to getting that seat, right? And it's walking the talk, in my opinion. It's walking the talk, and that's how you're going to get to those leadership roles,
Yeah.
so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've been excited about this class for a while.
Yeah, well, I hope I don't disappoint.
So
I have,
far, so good.
I have fun, that's for sure. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Adrina.
Hi.
Hey.
I am in environmental health and safety field. I've been working with different programs, and then as far as sustainability, making sure I worked for manufacturing, making sure the company had a program ISO 14001. So they were certified, and I was one of the auditors, internal auditors for the company, to make sure going through the processes. And one of the things that we were looking at was to conserve water. So I work with different programs, and I find this class interesting because some of the components I used during my career. I worked with manufacturing and engineers. So a lot of things that you were mentioning, I was introduced to them in manufacturing. Also, I worked in education. I worked in university, and I worked in a unified school here in Los Angeles. So just making sure, other than the employees, students are safe, also the environment is not harmed. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about uh, different like chain supplies and how like things are connected, I think based on what I went through, some of the things like I can connect the dots. Maybe not like in depth that I was involved with, but I got um, some background in it, and this class is interesting to me because I want to move up to management level. I've been working as a specialist coordinator. I started with a technician position. I moved up, and my purpose of going through this, because I already have my master's in environmental occupational health and industrial hygiene. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to move up to management, and I feel like this program is going to help me to go through the steps that I want, because oftentimes when I'm looking at job descriptions, even like if somebody doesn't have full background in EH&S, but they have an MBA, they're able to go into sustainability and other branches of it. So
Yeah.
I think this program is going to help me, and this class is interesting. Things that I'm hearing, I use some of the components in manufacturing.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm all about sustainability. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you go on to YouTube, just type my name in, and there should be about, I would say, 5 or 6 presentations that I've done within the last few months on sustainability at
Okay.
different conferences. So yeah, I think there's three on there. There's 3 on there from China. There's 1 from Indonesia. And there's 1 from Germany, I think. So, and because my thing is, I blend supply chain management, I blend technology, and I blend sustainability, because that's the things that are important to me. And I feel that without I also say that, and people disagree.
Mhm.
I say this whole pandemic is proof that we need to have sustainable practices, because that's an environmental factor. This whole pandemic is an environmental factor,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the way that we demonstrated the societal impact
Mhm.
is another impact to sustainability, right?
Right.
And you have and just yesterday, the geopolitical aspect of things is another impact on sustainability. So
Right.
it's kind of so my thing is, so I'm actually writing a book called AI for Good. So I'm talking about how we can leverage artificial intelligence to address sustainability development goals, right?
Mhm.
So the thing is that we have to come together to meet those goals. And AI is going to be the tool, in my opinion. AI is going to be the tool to get there, because it's they say that, and I'll be saying this all the time because it's very important. The UN said it's going to take us $5 to $7 trillion every year
Mhm.
from 2021 to 2030 to meet those goals. That sounds like a lot of money, but even if we just threw money at it, we're not going to resolve it. We're just throwing money at it.
Right.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with the money? What are you gonna do with the money? I said you can take every single professor at all institutions in the world. There's not enough to address all of these concerns around the world, because we have, and this is one thing that I found in speaking at those conferences around the world. We have tunnel vision in the U.S.
Mhm.
because whenever I talked about diversity and inclusion, I had a professor in India to say, Justin, he's like, meet me after this conference. He's like, I'll show you diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's we are selfish. I'll leave it at that. We are
Mhm.
selfish because there's a large percentage of people in India that
Mhm.
don't even have toilets.
Yeah. I had a coworker and he was visiting his family, and I was like, "Oh, it's very interesting. I heard a lot of good things, and it would be I would be interested to visit one day." It's like you wouldn't be liking it. Like after living, I moved here 20 years ago. I'm coming from Middle East,
Yeah,
so he said you wouldn't like going there because there are no toilets there. Like there's
yeah,
no, you can't go. So it's not gonna be ideal for you. That's what he told me. That was his response.
yeah. Because it's like some of the places like in Africa, like they don't have toilets, they have cell phones. What?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make
Right?
sense. Yeah,
They have Instagram, but they don't have toilets. It's
right.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. you know. So, but yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing I have a big push on, and that's one thing that I talked about in my interview whenever I got hired here. I said I'm all about sustainability. I want to integrate things. Like our whole entire program is built on sustainability. I said, all right, let's go. I said,
It's
let's go.
it's very interesting. Even uh, wherever I worked, like I notice safety, like it's there. The Office for Environmental Health and Safety is there. Sustainability is like being add on and still developing. It's not like fully every place I've been to, I worked at, it's not fully there. They're
But
trying to make it like develop it and improve things. And I'm very interested because I feel like I went through as I started as a technician, moved on to specialist coordinator. I feel like there's more for me to achieve. So my next thing is sustainability, but I think to go through that path, I need the business background. It's
yeah,
not just safety. That's why I
yeah,
want to have this combination so I can move forward and be more successful in sustainability.
yeah. So, and this is one thing. So, whenever people say that, the one thing I say is, I say Google the UN SD Sustainability Development Goals. There's 17 of them, right?
Mhm.
And I say that I did this in conferences. I've done this in classrooms. I just did it with a CEO of a company in the UK just this morning.
Mhm.
I say type in UN SDGs. I say look at all 17. I say pick your top two. I say pick your top two and tell me why. We'll probably do it once we get more people in this class. I know I sent the invitation out late, so I probably have a smaller group. But I say, you pick out your top two, and I say, and I guarantee you, we'll go, let's just say hypothetically we have 10 people and we go around the room, everybody will have different too.
Right.
But that's what we need, right?
Mhm.
We need
Yes.
different focuses in order to address those goals, right?
Right.
So, and I say that to say that if you get into sustainability is so broad, you know,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to hit all of them.
Right.
You know, you have to pick your top two. If it's safety, then that's that human and well-being part. That's SDG 2, I think, 2 or 3. You know, so you find your area, and then that's what that's what you need to hit hard within the organization. You know,
Yes.
so but in a management role, yeah, you're gonna be managing all the people who's addressing different areas, right? But I think that we're early on in sustainability. So at those conferences, we were talking about supply chain resilience because of the pandemic. We were talking about blockchain. We were talking about artificial intelligence. We were talking about sustainability.
Mhm.
And when I say sustainability, diversity and inclusion falls into that. You know, diversity, inclusion, gender equality falls under that sustainability umbrella. And I say that's what we're talking about. So you're going to see a lot of talk, and especially with Biden coming in, where I think he pledged $7 trillion to green energy, you know, within the manufacturing industry. So people are going to organizations are going to try to jump on that to get those incentives. You know, so you're going to see a push for sustainable practices within the organization once Biden gets in my opinion. I could be wrong, but he pledged it, so we'll see what happens. You know, again, walk the talk. Okay, you said it. Show me.
Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
believe it. I don't believe it until it's signed. You know. So
Yeah, true.
thanks for that. Adriana, are you able to talk or no?
Yeah, now I'm home, but the dog's squeaking a toy, so ignore that.
It's all good. My daughter will wake up any second now, so
maybe she needs to go outside. But I work for Thermo Fisher Scientific in the kind of supply logistics for clinical trials. I make sure that, you know, a small portion of the supply chain that we can get our manufactured reagents. We manufacture in Frederick, Maryland, and I coordinate all their shipping timelines and gather forecasts for our sites within country and out of country.
Mhm.
And so my goals for this class are to kind of, like Tom, you know, hone in those skills, kind of develop a broader set of skill sets. All my skills right now have been kind of self-taught. I don't leverage a lot of programs like Power BI or some of those trackers because my supervisor believes in the old school method. We just kind of power through it with Excel. He wants you to understand it, understand
like the
what's
majority
happening.
of the world.
Yeah. So yeah, we've definitely faced a lot of issues with the pandemic. Thermo Fisher, you know, you guys know, got one of the first approvals to do their attack path, you know, COVID testing. So we have priorities going on with our capacity. You know, COVID's top priority, my program or my product lines about third priority. So it's kind of fighting for our stuff right now. We even ran out of plastic tubes, right? Like we had everything to put into the tubes, but we didn't have plastics. There's just a shortage. And like you said, you can't plan for that. So it would be nice, you know, maybe some of these different strategies to have backstock of plastics or, you know, the raw material rather than just backstocks of finished goods. So I look forward to seeing what this has to offer.
All right, excellent. Yeah, and I had a VP of sales. This was during the pandemic. This is when the pandemic hit. So that class ran from like February to April. So this is like just right in the midst of the pandemic. And he's a VP of a manufacturer where they make the plastic pieces that you would see like in a distribution center or warehouse to keep out the wind and the rain and the snow and things like that. And, you know, he said during the pandemic that, you know, they were making these shields that you would see at the gas stations and the post office and the grocery stores and things like that. So their supplier was one of the main plastic suppliers in the country. And he pretty much said, you know, whatever resin you have, give us all of it. Give us all
Yeah.
of it. You know,
Well,
his
yeah.
company might be the reason why you don't have plastic tubes, because he took it all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it skyrocketed, right? Because supply demand, to balance out that supply, they had to increase price to kind of make it more harder to attain.
Yeah, I mean, look at the construction industry. I think they say, because I'm actually building a house now, and actually outside of Frederick, so I'm actually in Frederick now because we sold our house
Oh.
in Pennsylvania. But lumber's up like 3x or something like that, something crazy
Yeah.
like that, because of supply and demand, because everybody's selling their houses and they're building houses. You know, it's nuts. But you know, his point was, yes, we nabbed all of that plastic resin. He said, but we're not making that much money. We're not making any money, that much money off of it. You know, but we
Right.
see the need for we see a need for the world, pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's why we grabbed this resin, and we're producing full bore to get these shields out to the world. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, and we're gonna talk about this as well. Strategically, although they weren't making that much money on margin, now they have lifelong customers.
Right.
Think about it. You
Yeah.
know, who you think they're going to go to? And they were resilient. They were agile. They made something they never made before. You know, and
Yeah.
you know, again, that's going to lead to a competitive advantage. You know, and I told him that. I said that's going to lead to lifelong. Because he's like, I didn't ever think of it that way. He's like, we were just doing what was right. We were just doing what was right.
Right.
And that's what I talk about when I talk about sustainability. That's what I talk about when I talk about diversity and inclusion. When you bring in diverse individuals, now you get different perspectives. And I said you could be the most on board with this whole build a wall movement, right? I said, but if you have that mindset and you don't bring in those diverse, you know, opinions from Mexico, for example, that could be an untapped market. That could be a market where you could bring in millions of dollars, right? But if
Yeah.
you have that closed-mindedness because of, you know, the people you follow, because of, you know, what you believe in, right? You're closing yourself off. You're holding yourself at a disadvantage,
Right.
right? And again, but regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your affiliation, if you think about it from a business perspective, that's at a detriment.
Yeah. You're
You
just
have that
hurting yourself,
mindset.
boxing yourself in.
Yeah. So, and like I said, and this is with anything, you know, if you have that mindset and you don't do it, your competitors will. Your competitors are
Yeah.
going to do it, you know. And again, my definition of sustainability is, it's like taking the money out of it and just doing what's right. If you do what's right, the money's going to come. There've
Right.
been
That's like
numerous.
relationship management, you know, going
Say
from the
again?
tech, almost like relationship management, you know, that keeps everything going. Your friend made lifelong customers, you know,
Yeah.
it all touches.
And that's why I talk about servant leadership. So I got 4 minutes. I started in higher education at the Jack Welch Management Institute. And we used to go to these faculty retreats every year in Florida. And Jack used to be there. And we were sitting in a meeting one day, and he said that, you know, yeah, I was known as Neutron Jack. He said, yes, I got brought to GE to be a transactional leader. He said, yeah, he said, that was my mindset, right? You know, Jack Welch fired 100,000 people during his time at GE. 100,000. You know, that's why I got that name, Neutron Jack. So he said, yeah, I was a transaction leader. GE was the largest company in the world, right? He said, and with the remnants, you know, he became a transformational leader. He instituted change within the organization, right? But then he said that, he said, I was not proud of that, although he is the CEO of the century. But he said that, yeah, once I moved from that transformational leadership, and once he retired, he said, now I'm a servant leader. Now I'm a servant leader where he was going around the world, writing books, talking to leaders of organizations to say, how can you serve, as opposed to only focused on that transactional leadership mindset. Now,
Right.
my opinion is that you need to blend all three. And what I mean by that is that if I'm a manager, if I'm a DC manager at Amazon, I have to be a transactional leader, or else I'm not going to be there for long. I got to get those packages out.
Yeah.
But I also have to be empathetic of those employees as well. How many thousands of people caught COVID in those Amazon DCs?
Yeah.
So you have to, in my opinion, you have to blend all of those leadership approaches to be a successful leader. So again, I'm going to talk a lot about that because all three of y'all, and I'm pretty sure everybody else, wants to. Y'all here. I mean, why are you in an MBA program? To lead, Otherwise, I got questions of why are you here? But anyway, we're going to talk a lot about that. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that in every single class because I got my PhD in leadership and organizational change. So, that's my training, right? And that's my experience. I mean, I was a management consultant, so I was leading leaders. That's the way I see it. I was leading leaders, So, but I will say that my specialization was small and medium enterprises. But that's one of the main things that we're going to talk about in this class. Okay. So that's all I had to talk about tonight. Again, next week we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about more things. I mean, yeah, we talked about the components of supply chain management today, but we kind of talked about all the topics. So I'll talk to you all on the discussion boards. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. But to get a quicker response, just send me a text. 717-640-2320. I'll also put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
717-640-2320. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a great night.
You too.